Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's session called Self-Efficacy in the ABE Classroom. My name is Jamie Harris, and I will be helping you in the questions box and kind of lending technical support. But what I would like to do is introduce you to Ramona Kunkel. She will be presenting today's session. Make sure, if you're not familiar with this platform, that you see the orange arrow on the right hand of your screen. If you click there, you should be able to send us questions. So when you send a question, we'll be able to respond. Thank you so much for being here, and I will now turn it over to Ramona.
Thank you, Jamie. So good afternoon. And like Jamie said, this is the session called Self-Efficacy in the ABE Classroom. I'm Ramona Kunkel, and I am an adult education program specialist with the Maryland Department of Labor. I specifically put ABE in the title only because that's really where my background is. So I don't want to say this isn't applicable to ESL, but I just want to make it clear that that is my background. So I specifically titled it such. So we're going to talk about social cognitive theory, some barriers, self-efficacy itself, building self-efficacy, the teacher's mindset, and then we're going to spend a little time talking about empathy. So I attended a conference in February that was the Learning Disabilities of America conference. And one of the things that I learned there is that you really can't talk about self-efficacy without including Albert Bandura's social cognitive theory. So in the 1960s, he came up with something called the social learning theory. Then in 1986, just got retitled and was called the social cognitive theory. So according to his theory, there are three influences of behavior that affect our ability to learn. So the first influence is the behavior itself. So suppose you have a student who acts out in the classroom. That will likely gain the student some negative attention from the instructor and from the other students. Then there is the environment. Based on the student acting out, the instructor reprimands the student. This in turn creates a negative effect on the student and the other students, because it is now what could be possibly considered a hostile environment. The third influence is the individual's personality, their beliefs, and other cognitive factors. So according to Bandura, self-efficacy is one's belief in one's ability to succeed in specific situations and accomplish a task. So we're going to talk about barriers that our students face and the impact that they have on their ability to persist in their education pursuits. So there are three types of barriers. There's situational, there's institutional, and there's dispositional. And we're going to take a look at each one of those. So when it comes to situational, they are the main source of a student's attrition. However, these are the barriers in which students have little or no control. So we all know the vicious, so looking at the first one with economic, has to do with employment. We all know the vicious cycle, what our students go through. They look for a job, they get a job, that job may conflict with the time that the class meets, or it's just becoming too demanding, making it difficult to attend class, the student stops coming to class. That is until the student either gets fired, laid off, or they quit. The student looks for another job, but has difficulty finding one based on their lack of required education, and that brings them back to the program until they find another job, and then the cycle just starts all over. It can also be quite a challenge for a student to attend when there are family issues going on in their life. So in some cases, there is no support system. So we all know how difficult it is for us to go through a crisis or an issue, but not have, how much that has an impact on our life without having a support system. Then there are those who actually, in their family, that may even sabotage their efforts by throwing away their books or hiding the car keys so that the student can't get to school. Also, the environment in which the student lives has a big impact. If the environment in which the student lives is riddled with drugs and crime, that's going to have a negative effect, as well as the student's living situation, such as someone who might be couch surfing. Also, we have the sandwich generation, those who are caring for children, as well as those who are caring for elderly parents. Then, of course, we have physical and mental health issues, either themselves or for those in their family. That's going to have a large impact. The last one is the one that you might actually be able to have some control over to some degree, not across the board, but this is where scheduling your classes and your location really has an impact. The more class times and days and different schedules, even scheduling Saturday classes, and some programs even schedule Sunday classes, can make a big difference to removing that barrier. So the bottom line is students need more education to change their situation to these barriers. However, since they are the barriers that are most likely to prevent them from coming to class, it makes it difficult to overcome these barriers. So another one is institutional barriers. So unfortunately, a significant number of our students have had unpleasant experiences during their K through 12 years. So it can be particularly frustrating for students who needed and who would have benefited from accommodations that they didn't receive. So some students have been in or are in the correctional system, whether it's through incarceration or they are on parole or probation. And some agencies can be difficult to navigate, creating another barrier. I have a friend who has 2 sons that have severe challenges, and she's a very educated, smart woman, and she even expressed to me how difficult it was for her to receive the appropriate accommodations and services she needed for her sons. So imagine how challenging that is for our learners to navigate that system and to even know what's out there for them. Last one we're going to look at is dispositional barriers. So these are the ones that students have the most control over. However, they are the ones that are the most difficult to work through. So we're going to obviously talk about self-efficacy and confidence. Motivation and focus can be a huge barrier, especially if they have other mental health issues like depression or anxiety. Life circumstances pose a barrier, whether it's through trauma or crisis. If you happen to catch my session on Monday on managing stress and anxiety, the good news for that is that there's more and more strategies and resources out there that can be done to actually rewire the brain and to help those who have suffered even severe trauma work through that. Doesn't make it go away, but certainly makes it much more manageable so that they have an easier time getting through life. So the good news is that there's hope, and that we can actually change how our brain takes in information and what we do with that. There's also affective needs, meaning affirmation, love, care, and support. And then there's fear of failure, fear of their own safety, or fear of being judged. You know, we all have had students who may have been reluctant to read out in class, or even just to participate and to give an answer because they were afraid of being judged or being ridiculed or made fun of or whatever. Okay, so what is self-efficacy? So we're going to do this by talking about the difference between self-esteem and self-efficacy, because sometimes they are looked at as the same thing, and they are not the same thing. So we see on the left-hand side, we have self-esteem. That's a learner's general belief in their self-worth. So, for example, no one likes me. That's a very broad, general statement. However, we see on the right hand, self-efficacy is a learner's belief in their abilities to accomplish a goal in a particular area. So, for example, I'll never be a fast reader. So, for example, someone with low self-esteem might say, I'm not smart, I'll never learn anything, where someone with low self-efficacy will say, I'll never be able to subtract fractions. So interestingly, improving one's self-esteem has little effect on the learner's achievement. However, improving one's self-efficacy does have a positive effect. So Badura's sources of self-efficacy. So what he came up with was experience success. So you want to have students acknowledge and recognize their success. For example, some students use a student log for each student to complete at the end of class, indicating the work that they completed. And it also may include homework assignments. You may also want to have a student-teacher meeting once a month, once every other month, and sit down with the student and talk about what they have achieved, you know, so that they can see their progress. You know, take that student log and say, look, this is where you started. You started out with just being able to do, basics of fractions, but now you're able to do subtraction of fractions. So they can see that they are successful, that they are making progress. And sometimes students don't think that they're making progress unless it's pointed out to them. So he also found vicarious experiences can be a source of self-efficacy. So if they're in a class and a student sees or hears about the success of a student who is similar to them, meaning they have about the same educational level, that they think to themselves, oh, if that student can do it, so can I. So sometimes seeing another peer's success increases their level in confidence that they can do it themselves. Another one is verbal persuasion. So this is just simply verbally encouraging the student that encouraging the student to show that you have confidence in their abilities. So, you know, you're doing great work, you're putting a lot of effort in, you know, I have confidence in you that you're going to be able to do this. Also, being able to manage negative emotions. And this one may be the most difficult for students to do. But if the student is experiencing negative emotions, it will be difficult for them to believe in their ability to complete a specific task. So again, if you didn't catch my stress and anxiety session, you may want to look at that, because I talk about all the different strategies that teachers can use to help their students manage stress and anxiety, which would include also negative emotions. So we're going to look at some ways that teachers can improve or build self-efficacy in their students. So this is a combination of a whole bunch of strategies that I collected along with some other articles when I went to a learning disabilities conference in February. So the first one is task accomplishment and success. So this is considered the most important source for improving self-efficacy. So for example, have a student explain a process or procedure out loud, such as how to add fractions with a common denominator. You can also provide feedback on their efforts. So this leads to the student seeing that their efforts improve their performance. Give students tasks that are challenging but doable and ones they can accomplish. You want to give students adequate time to complete the task. Use scaffolding, which is just building one concept on another. You can have students work together. In which they can also see other accomplishments and successes. You can also have students explain the answer. So instead of accepting an answer and moving on, you can ask why, or how do you know this? It's again, a way for them to think all that through and to verbalize it. So you want to provide feedback, or students are left wondering whether or not they're making progress. In their task accomplishment, you also want to praise effort, not their intelligence. So a while ago, I did a presentation on motivation, and one of the things that was found is that there is much greater achievement that can be accomplished by praising effort, not intelligence. What happens when you praise intelligence is that the student is then more likely to be reluctant to take on work that is more challenging, because they're afraid that if they fail, then they're not going to look as intelligent. However, when they're praised for their effort, they're much more likely to take on more challenging work. So again, peer modeling is the second most important strategy. So that is actually more influential than instructor modeling. So the best peer models are those who make mistakes and have doubts about their own self-efficacy, but they see the student actually working through that process. So there's something called the coping model, which is actually more effective than the mastery model. So the coping model is that they're figuring things out. It's not just that they've mastered it. So the end goal is not just about mastery. Yeah, you want to figure it out. You want to be successful, but it's about developing strategies to get there. The next one is, so you want to have goals and honest feedback. So teachers set goals can actually have a greater impact than student-set goals. And the reason for that is when, now not to take away that we shouldn't have students set their own goals, but the point is that when a teacher sets a goal for a student, it demonstrates confidence in that student of their abilities to achieve that task. So feedback should also be frequent, elaborate, and positive. So it should also indicate what the student is learning rather than simply what the student got right. So you want to state their efforts and strategies that the student is using in being successful. So for incorrect responses, you can use this as an opportunity to talk through the thought process and give clarification or present the information again. So self-assessing one's own progress helps improve self-efficacy. You want to have the students think about what they learned that day. So sometimes you can even just have them do a little short sort of a reflection piece. You know, what did I learn today? What did I accomplish? You know, again, building up their sense that, yes, I can do this. You want to give review problems that are likely to lead to success. However, not so easy that the student may feel like, you know, this is so beneath them and, you know, oh my gosh, this is just busy work that I'm being given. You want to support students' affirmations, so have students express success themselves in other areas of their life, at work, at home, in their community. Again, just building a sense that they can do this. And you also want to develop teacher self-efficacy. Share your experiences of a time that you had a challenge and that you were successful, so they can see that, yes, you know, teachers also struggle, but they've also been able to be successful. So we're going to talk about improving and building self-efficacies in students. So you want to choose tasks wisely. Again, choose tasks that aren't too easy or too difficult. You want to make them just the appropriate range. You want to also allow freedom. So allow students to make decisions that affect their learning. Again, if they've got buy-in, they're going to be much more motivated and feel like, you know, like they're part of the process. You want to provide active feedback from students. So allow students to express their opinions. You know, sometimes it may seem like that's not a good use of class time, but sometimes that is the best thing that you can do for your students. Because in some of their situations, again, they may not have any support system. They may not have anybody that's willing to listen to them or care what they think. And just providing that opportunity, you're sending the message that, yes, what you have to say is of value, and I'm going to listen, and so are the other students. Now, the thing about opinions is sometimes this takes a little work because you want to make sure that students understand that opinions are opinions and that not everybody's necessarily going to agree, but that you want to respect the opinions of others, but you don't have to be on the same page. Active feedback from teachers. So again, going back to the honest feedback about their performance. And you want to provide multiple learning media. So one of the things that was presented at this Learning Disabilities Conference, and I have found in several articles, is that there is no evidence that supports that teaching to a student's preferred learning styles results in improved student performance. So the reason for that is that students may have a preferred learning style, but that doesn't mean that they don't learn through other methods, through other modalities. So performance that has multiple modalities, whether it's PowerPoint presentation using technology, pair or group work, project work, independent work, whether it's, through auditory, tactile, kinesthetic, letting them manipulate, materials. All that plays into it. And so you want to make sure that you provide a variety of sources. And also you want to provide efficacy in teachers. So teachers who have a positive sense of their own self-efficacy are able to recover from stress and maintain control. So this modeling increases self-efficacy in their students. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about an instructor's mindset and what that plays into all of this. So there was a study that was conducted regarding instructor's mindset, which demonstrates the impact that that has on the learner's attitude. So there was an online study that was based on a fictitious scenario. Students received a score of 65% on a math test. The study looked at the effect of the instructor's fixed mindset, which is the belief that people cannot develop their abilities and intelligence, versus those who had a growth mindset, which is the understanding that abilities and intelligence can be developed. So the instructors were asked to assign a percent that they thought was due to lack of hard work and the percent that was due to lack of math intelligence, so that it equals 100%. The study found that those instructors with a fixed mindset assigned a higher percentage to the lack of math intelligence. The thought was that the student wasn't smart enough in math, even though the student might have been working very hard. So the way this study went is that the students were given one of 3 different forms of feedback. So one type of feedback they were given was comfort feedback. And in the email, the student received, providing this comfort feedback, the instructor recognized that the student has other talents that made up for their lack of math ability. The student was told that he or she would be called on less in class if the instructor even called on them at all. The instructor was hoping to reduce the pressure that the student felt and that the student would be given easier math problems. The other type of feedback was strategy feedback. And in this one, the message was very different. The instructor suggested that the student change study strategies, such as work with a tutor, work with another classmate, or find supplemental educational resources. The instructor would then call on the student more, not less. And the instructor would give the student more challenging math assignments, not easier ones. The last type of feedback was the control feedback. And this is the entire message that they got. I want to ensure you that I know you are a talented student in general, and I want to assure you that I really care. So let's stay in contact about how you're going to do in class, how you're doing in the class. So the other feedback also got this statement. Whether they were in the comfort or the strategy, they received this also. So here's what happened with that. So then the students were asked how they perceived the feedback that they received. They found that the students who received the comfort feedback felt that the instructor had low expectations of them. They also felt that the instructor wasn't invested in that student. Students did not expect their grade to increase, and they felt less motivated. However, the students who received strategy and control feedback, they felt that the instructor had a higher expectations for making progress and that the teacher was invested in them. The student felt that his or her grade would significantly improve. It's kind of actually interesting that there wasn't a whole lot of difference between the strategy and control feedback, but it does demonstrate that the comfort feedback definitely had a negative effect. So what does this tell us? It tells us that the feedback we provide our students has a significant impact on how they feel about themselves and their ability to improve and make progress. Therefore, it's going to affect their self-efficacy. So I want to turn a little bit of our attention to empathy. And this topic came up frequently at the Learning Disabilities Conference that I attended. So here is just a definition of empathy. So true empathy requires that you step outside your own emotions to view things entirely from the perspective of the other person. So here are two other definitions. The ability to understand and share the feelings of another. And I want to understand how this feels to you and to let you know that you're not alone. So here are some elements of empathy. So one is perspective taking. So this means truly seeing the situation from the student's perspective. Sometimes that's not easy to do. So one of the things that we used to say is you never know what happened to that student before he or she walked into your classroom. So there are a host of issues that a student might be dealing with, and we have no idea what they are. So I'm going to tell you real quick about a story that I had with an interaction I had with a student many years ago. So the student was very disruptive to me, to the other students in the class. So as the class was leaving, I asked that student to stay and I want to talk to them. So I could have let them know how disruptive their behavior was and that it was inappropriate. Instead, in that moment, I said something like, "It looked like you're having a tough day. You weren't your usual self. Is there anything that you want to talk about?" From there, he just reeled off a list of things that had been going on in his life. So we sat, we talked about that a little bit. In the next class, he was much better. So maybe it was because he was simply having a better day. Maybe it was because he felt as if someone cared about what was going on in his life. Or maybe it was a little bit of both. So now I will say that this is one of those times I got it right, but I didn't always get it right. So we all have students that, depending upon the situation or our mental frame of mind at the time, it doesn't always result in the best outcomes. However, the idea is to try and be more aware and be the best role model that you can be. And also just to reflect and to think about what maybe you might do differently the next time. Another one is putting aside judgment. So whether we think they shouldn't have a bad attitude or not is really not for us to judge. So I heard it said that one of the worst things that you can say to someone with anxiety is, "It's not that big a deal." Because for that person, it may be that big of a deal because it's their deal. So while we may have the tools to handle their situation better, they may not. So the next one is trying to understand the student's feelings. We may not know 100%, and we won't know 100% with 100% certainty how that student feels. But the idea is to imagine yourself in that student's position and what it might feel like. And the last one is communicating.
Ramona?
Yeah. Yes?
We have a question from Marcus. It says, can you share a story of one of your most effective methods of developing self-efficacy in students? I think you just gave one story with empathy, but he's curious about an effective method through your experience of developing self-efficacy.
Okay, just hold on that thought and we'll get there. Okay, so communicate that you understand. So you might say something like, you know, it looks like you're having a tough day. Is there something I can do for you? Or you might even say, would you like to take a break? So most of us aren't looking for someone to help us, but just want to know that someone cares, and that can make all the difference. So with that said, there are times when you have to get tough, depending upon the student and the circumstances, but first try empathy and see if that doesn't work. So this instills a level of understanding and comfort. So if the student feels as if you understand their challenges, they can likely feel more comfortable, and it will lessen their stress and improve their sense of feeling as if they have the ability to complete a task given. So in other words, they feel like you have their back, and it will instill their confidence. So we're going to talk about, and I'm going to give an example here of the impact on self-efficacy. So these are ones that I gathered from the Learning Disabilities Conference. So again, in some cases, you may be their sole support system. Sometimes they have no family or friends to whom they can turn to for any words of encouragement or support. You're it. So show students that it's okay to make mistakes. We all make mistakes. I have seen some teachers do some very creative maneuvers to try and cover up their mistakes. Just own it. Just say, yes, I made a mistake. See that. Even teachers make mistakes from time to time. We all do. It will then lessen the stress of having to think that we're not supposed to make a mistake, which goes right along with the next one. Perfect is the enemy of good. So try and remove that whole idea that, you know, things have to be perfect, even for yourself. So I've seen several articles that just say that striving for perfection prevents us from actually getting things done. We stay in a loop of constantly trying to make it better that we don't finish or spend so much time that isn't necessarily productive. So another one is that I heard several times at this conference is emphasize the positive and de-emphasize the negative. So I'm going to tell you a story about something that I have done in my classes. I would say for most of the 30 years that I taught. So one of the things that I did, probably for all of my math classes, was when I graded something that they did, I would put a C next to those problems that they got right, and I left nothing with the problems that they got wrong. Here's the reason for that, is I wanted them to focus on the C's. If I put X's, their brain would automatically go to the X's and what they got wrong. And what I would do is I would then say, look at all the ones you got right. Now, in some cases, that's not always true, but even if it's only a couple, just say, look, you got these right. So I know you know how to do this. Because you got, if you didn't, you wouldn't have gotten these right. So what I want you to do is I want you to go back and take a look at the ones that don't have a C next to them, and just try and rework them yourself and see if you can find your own mistakes. And I'll tell you, more times than not, they found their own mistakes. And learners, it will make a bigger difference, a much bigger impact, an imprint on their brain if they find their own mistakes. So that was my way of, emphasizing the positive, but de-emphasizing the negative. The other thing that I did was I did not use the dreaded red pen. So we all know from our experiences, when we saw that red X, we knew that that was not anything good. And most students, they have a real connection between seeing a red pen marking and it being a negative association. So I ditched the red pen. I never used it. I would use other colors, green, purple, blue, black, it didn't matter. But I steered away from the red pen. And in fact, there was a woman who I guess was in her 70s, who did a presentation. And she even talked about, she was like in her 70s, and she remembered being in school, and she talked about that red pen and what a negative association she still has with a red pen. The other one is, this is my sort of passion right here, letting go of multitasking. Multitasking is one of the worst things that we can do. Our brains are actually not designed for multitasking. It is one of the most inefficient strategy. It has been shown to actually waste time instead of being more productive. Emphasize social connections. So one of the sessions that I attended was given by the University of Nevada at Reno, and they have a wonderful peer mentoring program. So specifically for learners with disabilities. So you might want to form a formal peer mentoring program. I have had students who just on their own pair up or form their own little study group. One thing that I did do is I would definitely encourage that at the beginning of the class. I would say, look, there might be times when you're not going to be here. You might want to know what we covered in class. So if you have somebody that you have exchanged contact information. Now, obviously, not everybody wants to do that, but if you're comfortable with that, exchange phone numbers, exchange email addresses, whatever. Now you have some support. So especially for those people who have no support, that is just really, really vital and may make the difference.
Ramona, we have another question from Dora.
Sure. Uh-huh.
How do you steer clear of correction or pointing out wrong answers, pronunciation, grammar, etc. in language instruction?
Okay, here's what I used to do. What I did, and I'm a big advocate of self-correction. So here was my rule in my classroom is, as the instructor, I was the only one that was allowed to correct a student who was reading out loud. And I made that clear at the very beginning. And I did that because I didn't want to have like 5 students pouncing on that student and sometimes giving incorrect information. So they're getting all this all over the place. So I was the only one who was allowed to do that. So the other reason was I wanted to not point out what they did wrong, but to try and give that student a chance to correct themselves. So when so even if they made a mistake in the middle of a sentence, I let it go until the end of the sentence. And then I would say, just think about what you just read for a minute, not saying, okay, you made a mistake. And then they would think, and a lot of times, now not always, and sometimes you have to step in. It's just the way it is. But a lot of times they would go back and they would think, oh, that didn't make sense. And they would go back and I would give them the opportunity to read that sentence again and try and self-correct. And it's surprising how often they will actually be able to self-correct. So again, that's just the way I did it, just because I felt like if you let students do it, it's pointing too much to what the student did wrong, instead of letting them have the opportunity to figure it out themselves. Does that help?
We'll see in the comment section. We do have another question. Is it now a good time? Okay.
Sure.
Do you feel students feel they are building their self-efficacy more by working with others, making connections, sharing their opinions and feelings with others, more so than working alone?
I'm going to say I would tend to think yes. And of course, like everything in life, it really depends. I think it depends upon the other students. If they're working with others that are constantly pointing out what they're doing wrong, then obviously that's not going to be helpful. But I think if you set up a system in place in which you establish boundaries, you establish what's going to be appropriate in your classroom and what's not, we don't make fun of students, we don't put them down, we don't criticize them, we don't tell somebody that they're stupid, or we don't make negative comments like that. That can definitely help you out. But it was interesting. I actually went to a poster session of somebody who had her poster session was about self-efficacy in youth. And I asked her specifically, and I told her the population that we work with, and I said, can people develop their own self-efficacy? And she said, actually, it's very, very difficult for that to happen. It's almost like they need to have other people around them that are helping them sort of retrain their brains and retrain the way they think and rewire, their thought process. So I would tend to say that, yes, I think you will likely have more success if they work with others and they're able to verbalize their success. Because when you're doing something yourself, you're not really thinking it through the same way you do when you verbalize it to another person. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so we're almost at the end here. So this is just my final thoughts, is never underestimate the effect you have on your learners. I don't want this to sound bigger than what it is, but I think sometimes we don't really see the impact, but you're having a much greater impact on your learners than what you might think or might believe. So I'm going to leave you with my final thought, and this is one of my favorite quotes by Maya Angelou, and it's a little fuzzy here. So I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So, this at the end of the day, this is really helping to, to have students feel like they can do it, to have some faith, to have some confidence in their abilities to complete these tasks that may seem, just monumental and something that is just unachievable. So I want to thank you all for your time and your attention. Are there any other questions?
I see another question. This
Sure.
one's from Lee. What is your suggestion for best practices offering corrections in an online class? I guess with the digital world we're living in.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. I think you can still implement those same strategies. I'm going to be honest and tell you that I've never taught in the world in which we're living right now, but I think you can still, the same thing applies. If you're having, students complete a lesson, you can just send back feedback like, these are the ones you got right. So you might want to look at the other problems, and don't even list out the other problems that they got wrong. Just say the other problems. Otherwise, they're going to be looking at, oh, there's only 5 problems that I got right, but she put down the numbers for 15 that I got wrong. I think, if you have students, again, reading out loud, you can do the same thing. Make sure that there's not a bombardment of, learners that are chiming in. Again, let students have the opportunity to self-correct. I think a lot of it comes down to, again, just pointing out what they did right, and then using that as a springboard for what they need to work on. Say, yeah, you know what, you got this right. So, you already have some of these skills in place. Sometimes I think they might think, oh my gosh, I got this wrong, so I'm starting all over. No, they're not starting all over. They can take those skills that they've already learned and apply them to those that they still need to work on. I think sometimes at the end of the day, and maybe I'm making it too simple, I think it's like a lot of things. It comes down to how you approach it, how you present it. Again, it's just all about positiveness.
So we have some thank yous in the chat box. Self-efficacy is really important to our students is a comment. Sheila also said, I would say consistent praise and acknowledgement, which is what you're saying, positivity. So yeah. Thank you so much, Ramona. For those of you who are participating in the chat box, you should see a couple links. One of the links is feedback. We would love to hear what your thoughts were so that we can continue to do those things. And if there's room for improvement, we'd like to know that too. You'll also see a proof of participation link in the chat box. If you are attending multiple sessions for the Virtual Training Institute, please complete the proof of participation form at the end and include all the sessions that you attended. That link is in the chat box as well. All right, we see some more. Thank you, very informative. Thanks so much. Self-efficacy is essential in life. Oh, second session with Ramona. Someone else came back to your session, Ramona.
Oh.
All right, so with that, we will end this session. Thank you so much for participating, and have a wonderful Wednesday.
Yeah, I want to say thank you, Jamie, for assisting me, and especially thank you for all participating. I really appreciate your time and attention, especially in a very, very busy time for all of us. So thank you. I appreciate your attendance.